Sticking on the power train, let's move over to topic 2. Let's talk about Power Rangers. What? Yeah, I know. The whole, like I said, they're similar in title, but not similar at all in terms of context. Very strange. So yeah, I kind of wanted to gush about Power Rangers a little bit in light of the Netflix special that came out not too long ago, Power Rangers Once and Always. Now, I have not watched the special, so I'll just put that out here right now. Haven't watched it, can't give a fair shake of opinion. Seems like the people who have watched it really enjoyed it. It's nothing that's going to break the bank in terms of story or cinema or anything like that, but it's exactly what Power Rangers is and always will be, is cheeky, cheesy, fun. And it was nice to see, you know, the reunion of some characters with Walter Jones and David Yost coming back, along with Steve Cardenas and Catherine Sutherland, Johnny Young Bosch, Karan Ashley, like a couple of the OG Rangers. Obviously, you know, Walter and David being the first two, and then you have second iteration of Red Ranger, second iteration of Pink Ranger, third Yellow Ranger. Oh, that's a whole new character. My bad. Second Black Ranger, second Yellow Ranger. Yeah, so you got a lot of, you know, OG in terms of the first couple seasons. Unfortunately, not everybody makes the return, so you didn't have Amy Jo Johnson being there. You didn't have Jason David Frank, R.I.P., Austin St. John. Obviously, the original Yellow Ranger, because of her passing ages ago. I don't think I've ever learned how to pronounce her first name, so I don't want to pronounce it, but Miss Trang. Yeah, so you get to see some footage of them, I guess, in terms of like flashback or archive footage, but they were not part of this new special. But yeah, it just seems like it's more fun, just Power Ranger gimmick stuff, as Netflix now kind of seems to be the platform for Power Rangers. And yeah, just kind of wanted to gush over Rangers and my history with them. If you've been here on the podcast for a while, you may remember some of the earlier episodes were me bitching and moaning and complaining about the, was it 2017 Power Rangers movie before that came out, and then being proven wrong because it was actually good. Not everything was great about it, but it turned out to be a good film. Just want to talk about it and just kind of talk about like how crazy it is, how successful, and like, what's the term? Not ageless, but how long this franchise has gone and what kind of media platforms it's gone through or cross over to. I don't know what I'm trying to say here. So you start with, you know, obviously Super Sentai, totally different program. Then we Americanize it into Power Rangers, going into the TV show, going into films, going into comics, going into video games, going into, you know, totally other stuff, music and stuff like that. It's crazy to see how one product just branched out and exploded in terms of all these different medias and platforms. And especially seeing what it is. It's just 6 kids, superpower kinda, and it's the typical every episode, something's going on in the kid's life. Monster gets sent down, fight monster, defeat monster, monster gets giant, we fight giant monster and giant robot fight, and then we solve kid's problem. Like every episode is almost the same, except for maybe bigger story arcs that are like 2 or 3 parters where you have actually some narrative and context or content going on that is meaningful, and not filler, but fluff in between the big stuff. So I watched Power Rangers pretty much from the start, or at least watched the reruns of a lot of programs, because Mighty Morphin started in 93. So, you know, as a kid, I wouldn't be able to watch that. But I think I popped on maybe around... See, I feel like looking at the dates of these, I feel like I watched some of them as they were airing, but I guess not. So around Zeo Turbo must have been where I started watching, but I do remember watching a lot of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers on Fox when they must have been doing replays and going through their stories, and just seeing the evolution of the characters and their story from Mighty Morphin to Alien Rangers and that little kind of in-between half season to Zeo to Turbo to Space to Lost Galaxy. That whole saga, I think that's called the Zordon saga. Zordon. I don't know why I put an E-N there. I think that's all kind of one continuous chunk, if you want to MCU it before the MCU was even a thing. All of that kind of flowed very nicely, where at least from Morphin to Space, there was always a character that crossed over, not necessarily from like OG the 6 to Space's 6, but there was somebody who crossed over from each season. So I think from Mighty Morphin, like, you obviously had the recast of in those 3 seasons from the OG Rangers to their second iterations. The second iterations, Jesus, words, all moved to Zeo. Cool. And then from Zeo to Turbo, I believe you had 4 of them move in, because you had the kid. Oh, I can't remember his name. But you had the kid hop into Turbo because Rocky got injured. Oh, now we're getting real into the lore. I think his name was Justin. And then from Turbo to Space, that was another 4 out of 5, because Justin couldn't go into space because Justin was a kid and he had to stay into school and, you know, be educated, which made room for the new leader, Red Ranger, Andros. I think it was Andros? Or no, that's a Star Fox villain, isn't it? And it's something. And then that's where we kind of got the gap of, like, you went to Galaxy, which I think is still technically part of the Zordon thing, but that was all new people that we got from there. There was no crossover. It was Andros. I was right. Whoa. So, but that was the big chunk that pretty much I watched. Then we got the Lightspeed Rescue, and that was where I kind of cut off. I don't know if it was an age thing. I know for certain one factor it definitely was. So in terms of the previous seasons, maybe not necessarily in Space and Lost Galaxy as much, but they were kids, teenagers with attitude, and they went in and they were doing the thing. We got the Lightspeed Rescue. They were all adults with jobs that were selected as Power Rangers through some process I don't remember. And to me, watching it as a kid, I was like, what? You got a firefighter, you have a paramedic or a nurse, you had a SeaWorld entertainer dude, you had a girl who climbed mountains, and then, oh crap, what was the other guy? He was like, I don't remember. I remember the opening, he was like jumping over some fence. No, I don't think they were in high school. I mean, the original ones, but I don't think in Lightspeed they were in high school. They just all were these people who were in important roles in life, which I get what they were going for, but it was just like, what? So that was where I kind of dropped off in interest, and it was just like, nah, this isn't for me. So let's see. Yeah, we had a firefighter, a lifeguard, and animal trainer was the blue one. Green Ranger was a stunt pilot. Yellow was an extreme sports athlete. And the Pink Ranger was a paramedic who practiced medical arts. Hey, I was right. Look at me. So it was just like they all have jobs. I don't know. To me, there was that disconnect. So I kind of dipped out a little bit there. And then I knew about it, you know, just because I had seen ads and stuff like that. It was still going on. It seemed like every year there was a new season. So I knew about Time Force. I knew about Wild Force, which Wild Force is where I kind of came back in and got invested in it. And, you know, it was still at this point, I think after Lightspeed was when we finally got like a whole new cast every time. So we had 6 new Rangers, we had a new guide or protagonist hero that was with them, and a whole new villain. So Time Force, we got that. Lightspeed, sorry. Lightspeed started that. So once we got to Wild Force, everybody was new, but it had this kind of interesting touch to it and flair to it where it kind of paid a little bit of homage in terms of the animals to Mighty Morphin, which I think intrigued me. And as you watch the show, like, the characters were interesting. I think the main guy, I don't think he was like a caveman. I think that was a different one. Oh, okay. He was just a guy in the jungle who just happened to be, like, newer in town. So, like, he was this kind of rogue guy to the group, but he was entertaining. But as you watch the show, something that was also neat, usually in all of these, you have the Megazords, so you can fight big monster, big robot. And they each had a piece of the robot that was theirs, whether it was an animal, it was a vehicle, it was something, and they would all come together, be this thing. And they've always had iterations on it, for sure, where, like, obviously with Mighty Morphin, if you got the Dragon Zord, they would meld with the other Zord, the Megazord, and become whatever they called it, Ninja Megazord. I don't think it was that. Or when the White Ranger came in, you got the eagle swooping in and come in the wings on the back, and I'm sure there was other stuff. But in Wild Force, they had totally different Zords that eventually came in that they kind of, like, acquired throughout time. Like, I think there was an elephant and maybe a gorilla. I don't remember. There was, like, other ones that kind of came in every once in a while. I was like, oh, that's really cool. The coolest part of Wild Force was when they did their anniversary special. And I'm like, I know what you're saying. You're like, what anniversary special? They did a very special episode called Forever Red. And I remember being hyped as shit for this episode when they first announced it and the lead up to it, and when it eventually aired on Fox or ABC Kids at this point. Very, very cool. So Forever Red was this big reunion of every Red Ranger from all of the episodes or seasons past, and they were coming together to fight some space Beetleborgs dudes from Power Rangers Zeo, I believe. And it was stupid. It was hokey. It didn't play into the main story at all. It was really like Wild Force Red guys like, hey, I'm getting called over to this thing. And then they just all kind of show up in their epic moments. And you see Austin St. John come in on a motorcycle. And, he's a little bit huskier than he was in the past. But he's like, hey, I'm the original guy. And then, of course, Jason David Frank is the shit, and the coolest one is Tommy, and, like, everybody's like, oh my god, it's Tommy, he's the coolest badass Ranger ever. Yeah, fuck the other Red Ranger guy, he sucks. Like, it was just so stupid. But it was a fun time seeing them all come together, and you got to see all of them. Pretty much everybody came back and, made an appearance in there. I think the only one that didn't make the return was the Alien Rangers. He was there, and it was a very cool appearance because I liked the Alien Rangers suit a lot because it was very basic, but it looked cool. But he never got out of the suit because they were from Aquatar, if you don't know, which was like a water planet, and they talked all in weird, like, they sounded like they were in underwater when they talked, and I don't know if they just couldn't afford the budget for the makeup or whatever, so they didn't bring him back in terms of, like, seeing his face out of suit. But that was just such a cool moment, and being, like, the first time where all of the Power Rangers came together for a while was something special. You had a bit of crossover here and there prior, right? Like, I remember in Space, I think Johnny Young Bosch came back with the original Morpher from Mighty Morphin, but it was, like, busted, so he couldn't do it all the time, and that was, like, he wanted to help but couldn't. So you had some crossover here. Like, I remember when the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles showed up. Yep, they teamed up with MMPR for a while in a few episodes. That was dope. So yeah, Wild Force was probably where I officially stopped. Then you had Ninja Storm, which I watched a little of, but that was where it kind of threw a little bit of a curveball into the mix. So usually with the Power Rangers, you started with 5, and then you would get a sixth who was like not the OG, the OP, the super powered one who had the cool shiny new suit and whatever, came in with the new gadgets and won everybody over. So like your green/white ranger, then your gold ranger. Zeo, I don't think got one. I don't think Turbo did either. Space was silver. Whatever. They came later. So Ninja Storm did something different where they didn't start with 5. They started with 3. Red, yellow, and blue. So that was like, oh, that's interesting. Eventually, I think they caught up to the 6, where just the other teammates came in later. But that Ninja Storm started. I believe Dino Thunder continued that. And then once we got to SPD Emergency, or whatever the hell the theme song was, I think they went back to 5. So, oh boy. So let's just run through all of them, right? So we had Mighty Morphin Power Rangers for 3 seasons. You had the Alien Rangers for half a season, because that was because they just came down to help the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers as they were turned into kids, and the Aquatar Rangers had to come help them. Yep, that's right. Then you had Zeo, you had Turbo, Space, Lost Galaxy, Lightspeed Rescue, Time Force, Wild Force, Ninja Storm, Dino Thunder, SPD, Mystic Force, Operation Overdrive, Jungle Fury, RPM, Samurai and Super Samurai, Mega Force and Super Mega Force, Dino Charge and Dino Supercharge, Ninja Steel and Super Ninja Steel, Beast Morphers, and then Dino Fury. Holy crap. 29 seasons of this. So yeah, I think once I kind of got a glimpse of a little bit of Ninja Storm, then it was like, nope, didn't know what was going on with any of them. But it's cool to see that it's continued, and obviously, it's something that goes generation to generation and is not necessarily for me to watch, because I'm not the target audience anymore. It's now for the kids of today who are hopefully watching it and getting something out of it. And it's cool to see them not rehash it, but reiterate, do it with a new cast, give opportunities to people, there in terms of acting and all that stuff, but bring something new to the table for the audience of today coming into it, boys, girls, whoever is watching this, and give them something to hopefully enjoy and get something out of it. So from TV shows, they crossed over to movies. So in terms of OGs, so we had the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie releasing on, hey, my birthday. And this movie is awesome. And, once again, it's not anything that's going to break the bank story-wise. There's going to be the greatest piece of cinema. But as a Power Rangers fan watching this on the puffy VHS, because I was too young at the time to go to the theater, it's so badass. You see the quality of, obviously the difference between TV to a movie production. Seeing the suits once they first morph in the construction site, and they all get their little entrance, and you get to see the emblems of each of the morpher in this high def at the time 3D, and the graphics, and seeing their struggle and their journey. You see some power-ups or different powers that they have in the fight with Ivan Ooze and those guys. Seeing the struggles, seeing the downside of them losing their powers, then doing the ninja stuff, and then getting the powers back, and then the Megazord in 3D, and Ivan Ooze being a dickhole, and so fun, so satisfying, a great movie that I will go to all the time, or quite often, and rewatch. It stands up, it holds up. Obviously, if you don't have the fandom, you might not get out as much of this as others, but still, good times. They did go back to movie theaters with earlier iterations one more time with Turbo Power Rangers movie. Quick harkening back to the original movie. This was a weird one because it didn't tie into the continuity. It was kind of just its own separate thing. So nothing carried over in terms of the show. They kind of redid how they were going to move on from there to go into Zeo. But yeah, didn't flush it out or combine it in between the two. But Turbo's was your transition from Zeo Rangers into Turbo officially. So I mentioned to it or alluded to it earlier with Rocky gets hurt, then Justin has to step in and become a Ranger. This was the origin story of that, where you saw the Rangers go from the Zeomorphers, and they actually show it in the beginning of the film, going into their new abilities, new suits, driving the cars, looking all cool, and then going on the pirate ship, and then dealing with evil versions of the Red Ranger and Pink Ranger and saving them. So you get to see that evolution there. Didn't perform as well as I'm looking at money right now. Yeah, it's hoofa. The original movie made $66 million. Turbo made $9 million. Whew. Yeah, definitely not as good. I still like it a lot, not gonna lie. But definitely has a different quality compared to the first one. Does not look as heavily produced. It looks more like kind of a middle step between the TV production and what the first movie's production level was. Not bad, just I can see why it maybe didn't deliver as much. The characters weren't as... They were betting on new characters and new villains in that hadn't been introduced yet in terms of the TV series. So there's a lot of, not unknown factors, but questionable factors in terms of characters to invest in or feel threatened by, I guess, in terms of antagonists. So that was there. And then we got the 2017 movie. So like I said earlier, we talked about this on the podcast ages ago at this point, where I was talking about like, oh, looks dumb, the Morphers look dumb, and Alpha looks dumb. I'll still stand by that. Alpha was horrendous. But in terms of a movie, they went for a darker feel, darker tonality. Fine, I get it. It was more of just like dumb fun. Not everything is great, but it did actually deliver in the end. I will say, in terms of the Rangers themselves, I think Billy's character was probably the most memorable. R.J. Seiler, I believe, is the actor's name. His character was probably the best that they did. The rest were kind of like, they had moments, but they weren't very memorable. I did enjoy Bryan Cranston's Zordon, as well as Elizabeth Banks' Rita. I thought they had a cool story there of them being, you know, early versions of the Rangers, which also might have been actually what they said in the TV series, but showing them, you know, clashing and then leading to this follow-up clash here. They had cool things that they showed and new energy to the original series and story that they had told, obviously, years and years ago, and had potential for the future. It was another one of those things where it didn't do super great. Like, apparently it was a bomb, quote unquote. It is in the green, it looks like. Yeah, it did make money, but still wasn't, as I guess, as much as they were hoping for. They did tease a continuation of the story with Tommy eventually showing up. We never got an actor or actress, as some theories would say, showing off Tommy, but we did get a post-credits tease for them. So, unfortunately, you probably will never see what the director and the team there planned for what was next, just based on the, you know, how the film turned out in terms of financially, how it performed. And apparently we're now getting an entitled Power Rangers film reboot at some point through Entertainment One, and it will be distributed on Netflix. So, potential. We'll see. I don't know. But there's hope there. So, we talked about TV. We talked about film, which, you know, those are probably the two most well-known forms of media that this product has gone into, besides action figures. Another one I didn't mention. But it's crazy to see how these games have broken forward through with like video games and comics. So video game wise, like there's been so many video games that the company has put out with the Power Ranger name, like whether it was Sega Genesis or Super Nintendo or PlayStation or Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, they're still making games, including a great fighting game, especially if you're into like Marvel vs. Capcom or 2D fighters. Power Rangers Battle for the Grid is an amazing game. It's crazy to see the titles that they did have across all these platforms, and some obviously to variety of success, but interesting to see them put the effort into it and do this cross media to just kind of promote their product. I remember as a kid growing up, I think I had Lightspeed Rescue for the Game Boy Color, which was a good one. I think it was one of those games where you needed like a code. Like, you didn't save your game. You needed a code per level, which is a little frustrating. And then I also had the Time Force game. That one I think I had a little bit more fun with, in terms of just like the challenge of the enemies that were there and the different time periods you would travel to for levels that they made you go through. But let's talk about Battle for the Grid, because this one's an interesting one. I think this was an independent production team. So let's see. Fighting game developed by San Francisco-based developer Enway, featuring characters of the Power Ranger franchise. It was released digitally. So fighting game in which players compete in battle using characters with different fighting styles and special attacks. Players select teams of 3 to engage in one-to-one combat and can choose to switch between them at any point during the match. So yeah, very similar to Marvel vs. Capcom. Very good combat flow. So when the game initially launched, it didn't have a lot of characters. It only had 12 available to it, which I think was something that held it back, but I understand it was a smaller team. So limited roster, but the amount of combos and the flow of the combos and how the gameplay actually was fantastic, and still is fantastic. And this game has gotten a lot of support since it's come out. I think it might be done in terms of DLC and characters that they have released for it, as Enway seems to be working on their new Power Ranger game. But this was something that like sparked a lot of the FGC, the fighting game community, and got people excited about it. And it was a good match for like, hey, let's take a game that people are like thirsting for, that unfortunately Marvel and Capcom can't seem to come together and make. We had the Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, where the gameplay was there, but the rest was just lacking so much. Where we had the hopes, the audience was there, it didn't deliver. Let's give them something with that gameplay, but with a license and character base that has a lot of nostalgia factor, but maybe isn't the most prevalent right now, and let's make something here. And it blows it out of the water. It also brings in the comic book stuff, as I'm going to talk about now, where there's been there's rather been Power Ranger comics, I'm sure, for ages and ages now. But it seemed like in 2015, 2016, the comics kind of made like a giant resurgence with Boom Studios, where they made Mighty Morphin Power Rangers comic books, and eventually led to this like Battle for the Grid, I believe is what it's called, where it brought all these Power Rangers from different iterations together that were fighting against the new enemy, which was Lord Draken, I believe, which was like an evil version of Tommy. And I don't know the full story of it, so I don't want to talk out of turn with it, but that comic series seems to have blown up and is continuing and having a lot of success. So Boom Studios, good on you. But seeing those stories implemented into the Battle for the Grid video game, just another layer of like cross promotion and taking a storyline and just driving it forward and building upon it. Very, very cool. So yeah, just, I don't know, Power Rangers, yes, it's hokey, yes, it's cheesy, it's not gonna once again break the bank in terms of storytelling, but if this is something you ever gave a shot as a kid and watched, it's just very cool, or very interesting, at least in my perspective, to see how something like this, where it started in one avenue, as bringing something over for American audiences and watching it just blow up into all these different platforms and outlets and whatever, and seeing it still go today, as we've seen many IP, story, project, whatever it is, they try something, it doesn't work, and it like goes to the wayside and goes into the annals of history. See something like this to have a lifespan of like 30 years at this point is nuts and is crazy. And I just kind of wanted to gush about it, take a moment to talk about it and my history with it. Obviously, you know, a lot of nostalgia there, still a lot of fandom there, but obviously also still so much I don't know. Like I'd be interested in getting into the Boom comics a little bit more. I think I only have, excuse me, a few issues of the initial run, but seeing, maybe getting some kind of graphic novel version of it and seeing where the story is and what they're telling there, what kind of stakes they have, and also maybe checking out, you know, some of the older seasons of the show, or seeing, I know Megaforce had a lot of crossover. That was like their whole basis of their show or their season, was using powers and abilities from former Rangers, and then they had this giant crossover episode where they had like an army of a wide array of cast of Rangers back for some battle or whatever. Be cool to see. Once again, just kind of scratch that nostalgia itch, have some fun with it, and you know, check the box, I guess you could say. But yeah, hopefully you guys had some fun with this little nostalgia trip of Power Rangers. Yeah. Well, everybody, this has been another episode of the Wait, What Are We Talking About podcast. My name is Bret, aka Enigma9011, and you can usually catch this podcast live over on twitch.tv/Enigma9011 on Sundays at 8 p.m. Eastern. Join the chat, join on the conversation like Rainbow did today, and have some fun with us talking about weird topics, strange topics, fun topics. But if you can't catch live, that's A-OK. Go over to YouTube and podcast services the very next week, where it's broken out topic by topic and put as one big video and MP3 for your amusement on the following Friday. Last but not least, any way you can support the show, likes, subscriptions, shares, reviews, whatever it is. It may seem small, but it does help the channel grow, helps us out significantly. So whatever you can do, if you have the time, please do that. We would love you for it. Appreciate you guys hanging out for this one, for two very different topics, but hopefully you had some fun with it. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Take care.